Have you ever wondered why, even when eating revoing outside and trying to follow all the recommendations, your blood sugar level remains high? That feeling of frustration appears when you look at the test results or measure your blood glucose at home and think, it's not possible. I'm doing everything right. And the most unsettling thing is realizing that this happens to many people who live with diabetes or prediabetes. People who really strive to have a healthy diet, who read labels, who carefully choose what they put on their plate. What you are about to discover may surprise you, because the truth is that eating right doesn't always mean controlling blood glucose. And there are silent mistakes that go unnoticed in everyday life and keep blood sugar high, even when the intention is to do everything in the best possible way. It's important to make something very clear from the start. If you are making an effort to take care of your diet, this already shows commitment to your health. The goal here is not to point out mistakes to generate guilt, but to open your eyes to patterns that almost no one talks about. When you understand how these silent mistakes work, you gain power. The power to make more conscious choices, to adjust what needs to be adjusted, and, most importantly, to stop blaming yourself for something that isn't a lack of willpower. Throughout this video, you'll begin to see food in a different way. You'll realize that it's not just about what you eat, but how, when, and in what context these choices happen. You'll understand why some popular strategies simply don't work for everyone and why so. Many people continue to have high blood sugar, even when eating right. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because much of this information isn't widely disseminated, despite being extremely important for anyone who wants to improve their blood sugar control. If you feel this type of conversation helps you, subscribe to the channel to continue following content like this. The idea here is to build a safe space where we can talk about mistakes, lessons learned, and real solutions, without judgment and without miraculous promises. Each person who subscribes strengthens this community and allows this content to continue being produced with even more depth. Let's start with the first silent mistake, because it is undoubtedly one of the most common and also one of the most difficult to notice. Overtrusting foods labeled as healthy is something almost everyone does, especially those who live with diabetes or are trying to control their blood sugar. After all, we've always heard that if a food is natural, whole grain, light, or recommended by experts, it is automatically a good choice. But the body doesn't read labels, and blood sugar doesn't react to marketing promises. Many people believe that by replacing clearly harmful foods with versions considered healthy, the problem is solved. Sugar out, honey in. White bread out, whole wheat bread in. Soda out, natural juice in. It seems logical. It makes sense at first glance. And it even generates that feeling of, I'm taking care of my health. The problem is that several of these foods, despite their healthy image, can cause glucose spikes as intense as the versions you tried to avoid. Think, for example, about fruit juices. How many times have you heard that natural juice is healthy, full of vitamins, better than soda? And in fact, it does have nutrients. But when the fruit is squeezed or blended, the fiber practically ceases to fulfill its role, and the fruit's sugar reaches the bloodstream very quickly. For those with diabetes or insulin resistance, This can mean a glucose spike soon after consumption. And the most silent part of all this is that the person drinks the juice thinking they are doing something good, without imagining that that glass may be significantly raising blood sugar. Another classic example is whole grain foods. Whole wheat bread, whole wheat crackers, whole wheat pasta. The word whole grain gives an immediate sense of security. But many of these products are still rich in refined carbohydrates, have a high glycemic index, and little real fiber. The result: glucose rises quickly, insulin is required in excess, and a short time later, that hunger returns. How many times have you eaten whole wheat bread for breakfast and 2 hours later been hungry again? This is a clear sign that that food, despite the healthy label, did not help control blood glucose. There are also sugar-free products. This category deceives many people. Cereal bars, yogurts, cookies. Fit or diet desserts often carry this seal, as if it were a free pass. But instead of sugar, other ingredients are used that also impact blood sugar, such as refined flours, maltodextrin, glucose syrup, or even sweeteners that stimulate insulin release in some people. The result is that blood glucose levels rise, even without declared sugar on the label. And that's where the confusion comes in. But how is that possible if there's no sugar? This is exactly the type of silent error that keeps blood sugar high without the person realizing it. And it doesn't stop there. Foods considered natural, such as granola, honey, acai, tapioca, and even some fruits in excess, easily make it onto this list. These are foods that are part of the daily lives of those seeking a healthy diet. But depending on the quantity, combination, and time they are consumed, they can cause significant glucose spikes. Tapioca, for example, is seen as a light and healthy option for breakfast or a snack. But it is basically a rapidly absorbed carbohydrate, which can raise blood sugar very quickly. The big problem here isn't demonizing these foods, but understanding that healthy doesn't automatically mean safe for blood sugar when you trust the label too much and your body's responsible. This silent mistake sets in. The person continues eating that food every day without understanding why their blood sugar insists on staying high, even with all the effort. Understanding this first mistake completely changes the way you look at food. You begin to realize that it's not enough to choose what seems healthy. You need to observe how that food affects your blood sugar, your satiety, and your energy throughout the day. And from that point, becomes much easier to have habits that, like this one, seem harmless but are silently working against you. And that's exactly what we're going to continue exploring from here. Let's talk now about the second silent mistake, which is much more common than you imagine, ignoring the impact of portion sizes. Many people living with diabetes or trying to control their blood sugar believe that if the food is adequate or healthy, it doesn't matter how much you eat. After all, it's good for me, right? This is a classic trap, because even the best foods can cause glucose spikes when consumed in excess. What few people realize is that blood glucose control depends not only on the quality of what you eat, but also on the quantity. A simple example: oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, or even fruits are excellent choices when used in a balanced way. But if you overdo the portion, even low glycemic index foods can raise blood sugar quickly. It's as if each bite adds points to your glucose level. And in the end, the bill can be much higher than you imagine. Think about that moment when you prepare a healthy dish. You fill your plate with brown rice, add a generous portion of vegetables, protein, and even a piece of fruit for dessert. Individually, each food is good for blood sugar, but together and in large quantities, they can generate a silent sugar spike that goes unnoticed. And the worst part is that often the person only feels a slight drowsiness or hunger, again a short time later, without realizing that it was the excess portion that caused it. Another very common example is the consumption of fruits. Eating an apple or a serving of strawberries is great, providing fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants. But what if a person eats 3, 4, or more fruits at once? Even if they are healthy fruits, the natural sugar they contain accumulates, and the body has to deal with a greater glucose load than expected. This is especially critical for those with diabetes or insulin resistance, because the body already has difficulty processing large amounts of sugar efficiently. The same goes for foods rich in protein or complex carbohydrates. A handful of nuts or a serving of beans is great, but overdoing it, even without resorting to sweets or fried foods, can still impact blood sugar. Therefore, quantity and quality go hand in hand. There's no point in choosing the perfect food if you don't pay attention to the amount. And often, the person doesn't even realize they're overdoing it. Eating a little more has become a habit, and this daily sum of small extra portions creates a silent effect on the blood. This is the great danger of the second mistake. You can't just rely on food choices. You need to measure, observe, and understand how your body responds. As you reflect on this, you may realize that some of your daily habits fit perfectly into this pattern. Eating more than necessary even when the foods are healthy. Skipping meals and then compensating with large portions. Or simply underestimating the effect of quantity on blood, sugar. All of this contributes to keeping blood sugar higher than it should be. And it is precisely this perception that will pave the way for identifying the next silent mistakes, those that continue to sabotage blood glucose control even when you make healthy choices. From here, it becomes clear that it's not just what you eat, but how much you eat that makes all the difference. And it is precisely at this point that we will delve into the next silent habit, which many people don't even imagine influences blood sugar so much. Let's move on now to silent mistake number 3, which many people never consider: eating foods in the wrong order. It may seem strange, but the sequence in which you consume foods during a meal makes a huge difference in how your body processes blood sugar, even if you are choosing healthy foods. If the order is not correct, glucose spikes can happen silently without you realizing it. Think of a typical meal. You put proteins, vegetables, brown rice, and, at the end, a piece of fruit for dessert on your plate. Sounds perfect, right? But if you start with carbohydrates, such as brown rice or whole wheat bread, glucose enters the bloodstream very quickly. The body needs to release insulin to deal with this glucose. And if the response is not efficient, this generates a sugar spike. But if you start your meal with fiber and protein, such as vegetables and lean meats, the effect is completely different. Sugar absorption is slower, blood glucose rises gradually, and spikes are much smaller. This concept is known as food sequencing or food order, and studies show that small changes in the order of foods can significantly reduce the post-meal glucose spike. It's a simple, almost imperceptible, but powerful strategy for those living with diabetes or who want to keep their blood sugar stable. And the best part is, it's not about restriction. It's about intelligent plate organization. Let's look at everyday examples to make it clearer. Imagine you're going to have lunch and you put a salad, a portion of grilled chicken, and some brown rice on your plate. If you start with the salad and the protein, then eat the rice. Your body can absorb the carbohydrate more slowly and in a controlled way. Now, if you start with the rice, then the chicken, and finally the salad, the glucose from the rice enters the bloodstream quickly, generating that spike that you don't even notice, but which is repeated in several meals throughout the day, impacting your average blood glucose level. Another example is breakfast. Eating toast or whole wheat bread before consuming eggs, avocado, or yogurt can raise glucose faster than if you start with proteins and fats. Small changes, such as starting with scrambled eggs and then consuming the bread, already make a significant difference in silent glucose spikes. What makes this mistake so silent is precisely the fact that you don't immediately feel the effects. There is no intense energy crash or clear symptoms, but the body is dealing with repeated sugar spikes that impair long-term glycemic control. And many people continue to ignore this strategy, simply because they were never taught about the correct order of consumption. As you reflect on this, you may realize that in some meals of your day, you have already made this mistake without realizing it. Eating carbohydrates before other food groups is practically an ingrained habit. But understanding the food sequence opens doors to simple changes that have a real impact. And it is precisely this attention to detail, to how you organize each meal, that will prepare the ground for the next silent mistakes. Because, just like the choice of food and the portion, the order in which you eat is another factor that, although subtle, directly influences how your body handles glucose. From here, we will delve into the next silent mistake, which often goes unnoticed, even by those who are already attentive to the quality and quantity of food. Now, we come to silent mistake number 4, which is as dangerous as it is invisible: not paying attention to invisible glucose spikes. This is one of those habits that go unnoticed because it doesn't cause immediate symptoms. You don't feel a sudden drop in energy. You don't get thirsty or suddenly hungry, and yet your blood sugar is silently rising and falling, impairing glycemic control over time. Many people live with the false impression that if they don't feel symptoms, everything is fine. But the body reacts discreetly. These invisible spikes happen right after meals, snacks, or even after consuming foods that seem neutral. Each small, unnoticed increase in glucose accumulates, making blood sugar control more difficult and increasing the risk of long-term complications. It's like driving a car with a broken dashboard. You don't notice the immediate warnings, but the engine is suffering silent wear and tear. A good example of this is those quick snacks between meals, such as fruits, juices, yogurts, or even sugar-free or fit foods. They seem harmless, but they can generate small glucose spikes that are not felt, especially if you don't measure your blood sugar immediately after eating. Overtimi. These invisible spikes add up to those that already occur during main meals, and the average blood glucose level remains high. even if you believe you are eating in a controlled manner. Another important point is that these invisible spikes can occur even at unexpected times, such as after light physical activity, stress, or the consumption of certain medications. The body releases glucose into the blood in response to various stimuli. And if you don't monitor these moments, it becomes impossible to identify patterns and adjust habits effectively. That's exactly why paying attention to invisible spikes is so crucial. Prevention is always better than trying to correct things after the numbers are already high. As you reflect on this, think about how many times you've measured your blood sugar only at strategic times, such as before meals or upon waking, and haven't noticed the post-meal or daytime spikes. This lack of observation creates a silent effect. You think your blood sugar is under control, but your body is dealing with constant fluctuations, which may go unnoticed but add up to negative long-term impacts. This is a real warning sign. Even without symptoms, your body needs attention. Consciously monitoring blood sugar, observing the foods that cause these spikes, and identifying patterns of invisible spikes is essential for anyone who wants to keep their blood sugar stable. And once you understand the importance of this care, it becomes easier to see how other silent mistakes, such as oversized portions, poorly chosen healthy foods, and the order of meals, combine to keep blood glucose higher than it should be. Now that you've begun to see the importance of paying attention to invisible spikes, let's prepare for silent mistake number 5, which is also very misleading and is present in the daily lives of many people, without them realizing it, continuing to impact blood glucose in a discreet but significant way. We've arrived at silent mistake number 5. And this is one of the most misleading, thinking that sugar-free is always safe. It's easy to be swayed by colorful packaging, eye-catching labels, and words like zero, sugar, diet, or fit the impression these labels give is that you can consume the product without any worries. But the reality is quite different. Each small, unnoticed increase in glucose accumulates, making blood sugar control more difficult and increasing the risk of long-term complications. It's like driving a car with a broken dashboard. You don't notice the immediate warnings, but the engine is suffering silent wear and tear. A good example of this is those quick snacks between meals, such as fruits, juices, yogurts, or even sugar-free or fit foods. They seem harmless, but they can generate small glucose spikes that are not felt, especially if you don't measure your blood sugar immediately after eating. Vorcimi. These invisible spikes add up to those that already occurred during main meals, and the average blood glucose level remains high, even if you believe you are eating in a controlled manner. Another important point is that these invisible spikes can occur even at unexpected times, such as after light physical activity, stress, or the consumption of certain medications. The body releases glucose into the blood in response to various stimuli, and if you don't monitor these moments, it becomes impossible to identify patterns and adjust habits effectively. That's exactly why paying attention to invisible spikes is so crucial. Prevention is always better than trying to correct things after the numbers are already high. As you reflect on this, think about how many times you've measured your blood sugar only at strategic times, such as before meals or upon waking, and haven't noticed the post-meal or daytime spikes. This Lack of observation creates a silent effect. You think your blood sugar is under control, but your body is dealing with constant fluctuations, which may go unnoticed but add up to negative long-term impacts. This is a real warning sign. Even without symptoms, your body needs attention. Consciously monitoring blood sugar, observing the foods that cause these spikes, and identifying patterns of invisible spikes is essential for anyone who wants to keep their blood sugar stable. And once you understand the importance of this care, it becomes easier to see how other silent mistakes, such as oversized portions, poorly chosen healthy foods, and the order of meals, combine to keep blood glucose higher than it should be. Now that you've begun to see the importance of paying attention to invisible spikes, let's prepare for silent mistake number 5, which is also very misleading and is present in the daily lives of many people without them realizing it, continuing to impact blood glucose in a discreet but significant way. We've arrived at silent mistake number 5. And this is one of the most misleading, thinking that sugar-free is always safe. It's easy to be swayed by colorful packaging, eye-catching labels, and words like zero, sugar, diet, or fit the impression. These labels give is that you can consume the product without any worries. But the reality is quite different. Now that you understand how blindly trusting sugar-free products can be harmful, let's move on to the next silent mistake, which is equally unexpected and continues to affect your metabolic health without you realizing it. Now that we've identified the 5 silent mistakes that can keep your blood sugar high even when you think you're doing everything right, it's Jimmy to turn the tables and think about what you can do differently starting today. The good news is that you don't need radical revolutions or impossible diets. Small, conscious adjustments to your diet and daily habits can generate surprising results in blood glucose control. Observing the quantity of each food, paying attention to the order of meals, monitoring invisible peaks, and questioning the idea that sugar-free is always safe are simple but powerful steps. When you start applying these changes, you realize that healthy eating ceases to be just a theoretical choice and begins to generate real effects on your body and your energy throughout the day. Think of it as a game of small victories. Every conscious choice, every portion adjustment, or change in the eating sequence is a step that helps the body keep blood sugar more stable, insulin working better, and the feeling of well-being increasing. It's amazing how seemingly small details can completely transform how you live with diabetes and how you feel after meals. Glycemic control ceases to be an invisible challenge and becomes something you can actively influence with awareness and strategy. And finally, it's important to reinforce that understanding these silent errors is not just information, it's power. Having clarity about what really affects blood glucose is an essential step to living better with diabetes, reducing frustrations, and making smarter decisions about food, lifestyle, and overall health. Every detail you apply makes a difference, and every change you implement brings you closer to a more balanced and healthy life. If this content made sense to you, like the video and help spread this important information to more people who are also seeking to understand and better control their blood glucose. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. because here we share practical, reliable, and science-based tips that can transform your routine. And leave a comment telling us which of these silent mistakes you most identified with, or which habits you realized you were maintaining without noticing. Your participation not only strengthens the community, but also helps other people feel connected, understood, and motivated to improve as well.